Welcome to the podcast Verses and Visions. I'm your host, Cassidy Beck. Today's episode will be very special. We have a lovely guest, Ashley Simmons, and I'm just going to say right off the bat, Ashley Simmons is very special to me as she is my sister. Ashley Simmons is the CEO of SodaBeers Craft Soda Company, best known for their prized apple beer. Ashley had the pleasure of working for her father and SodaBeers founder, Larry Stillman, for 20 years. Ashley carries her father's legacy forward as she leads SodaBeers, a woman-owned, family-owned business where she seeks to grow the brand product offering and make it available in more locations. Under Ashley's leadership, SodaBeers has won many accolades, winning Utah's best beverage 13 times and Utah's best product. Ashley was a keynote speaker at Governor Spencer Cox's One Utah Summit in 2023. Ashley got her degree in landscape architecture and environmental planning. She worked as a designer for an architecture firm until one fateful day when she casually said to her father, "Your apple beer packaging is the wrong color." From that point forward, Ashley was put in charge of all soda beer packaging and artwork, which she still oversees today. When she isn't sampling craft sodas, you will find Ashley spending her free time with her husband, 3 teenagers, and 2 dogs. Ash, welcome.
Thank you, Cassidy.
Ash, tell us more about yourself.
I like to jog. I like art. I love to read. My family is the most important thing in my life.
What area in your life do you feel like you're most proud of?
Say, my relationship. Because it's the most important thing to me. I'm happiest about that because the requirement to have a good relationship is to apologize and forgive a lot. And so that's probably the thing I'm most happy about in my life. And also, I really enjoy pondering spiritual things and reading a lot. Those are things that bring me a lot of happiness.
That's really cool. So I love that you were saying about relationships and your family relationships and how you're going to put those above other things. And that is certainly something that I can say isn't something that Ash just talks about, but something that I have seen for real in her life. Like that's something that I know is true for you because I have seen that and I have felt that. We'll just dive right in. Imposterism is something that I really like to talk about.
Yes.
And one of the things that I feel like helps with imposterism is if you know your why. And I think, so I guess the thing that I'm going to ask is like a 2-part. Can you tell us your why?
Oh, absolutely. I can tell you my why. So you're saying that you feel that when someone knows their why, they're less likely to experience imposterism?
As entrepreneurs, bumps in the road happen. I feel like that is the fine print of entrepreneurship. It just gets bumpy and it gets hard. And when you circle back to your why, if you have a true guiding philosophy that helps you dig deep and overcome the bumps in your road.
Okay.
So the question I'm asking is twofold. What is your why? And how knowing that has helped you navigate bumps in the road.
Okay, I probably have 40 whys to be honest, but 2 that I think on. One of them is about mission and purpose. I'll talk briefly about my purpose. One of the purposes I feel with SodaBeers, Dad started apple beer, and it was this amazing beverage that he discovered when he was in Germany serving on a mission. It was an alternative to alcohol for the community members who don't drink alcohol. It's an inclusive beverage to give them a way to celebrate with the rest of the community that loves their craft beers. They came up with an equally delicious craft alcohol-free beverage. Dad brought that home and ran the company for 54, something around there, of the 60 years that we've been in business. That was his why, and I had to find my own. My why also has a similar theme. I served a mission in New Zealand, and part of our mission in New Zealand covered the island of Rarotonga. And I had the chance to go to Rarotonga. It's in the middle of the South Pacific. in the Cook Islands. Because the island was really small, every Friday there wasn't a lot to do. And so everyone got drunk on the weekend. That led to a lot of alcohol abuse and physical abuse. Missionaries see things that no one else sees because we are told people's secrets, their most heartbreaking life experiences. I began to hate the punishing effects that alcoholism had on a society because I saw so much abuse, especially of women and children. One night when we were coming home, we were walking through the mountain. One side of the pathway home was a wall, and the other side was a cliff. It was just road was cut into a mountain, and we saw a car coming towards us, and it was in the evening, so his lights were on, and we could see that he was swerving from the wall to the cliff to the wall to the cliff, and we were really afraid for him. And as he got closer, we started to really be afraid for ourselves. And he aimed right at us. I was pondering, okay, do I jump or do I get hit? And there wasn't even time for my companion and I to discuss it. That's how quickly he turned and aimed at us. We just had to react. But right before he was going to hit us, he miraculously swerved to the other side of the road. It was a convertible, so smell him and hear him with his slurred speech. I knew he had no idea how close that was. He didn't know, and if he had hit us, he wouldn't have known either. At that moment, I made a promise that in my life, I was going to do something to help solve this problem. I quickly forgot that promise. I didn't think about it again. I thought about the experience, but I didn't think about the promise because what was I going to do? It wasn't until Dad got sick, I found out that he wanted me to leave the company the same time everyone else did. He just sent out an email. As I was pondering this, that memory came back to me. And I had not thought about that promise. Our product is a way for people to celebrate without the harmful effects that alcoholism can bring into their lives. Our number one consumers are teenage boys. It gives them a way to celebrate and have fun without some of the pitfalls that they can find, especially at the young age. So I feel like that is my why.
I think that's a very powerful why, and what an incredible story. And I'm grateful that he swerved at the last moment. My life would certainly, as would yours, have been different had he not swerved. So very grateful for that. But to speak to your point about celebrating, I have my own personal story about SodaBeers and celebration. So Ted and I were married about 15 years ago, and we chose to get married in a temple. And we also wanted some things of a more traditional wedding that we wanted to incorporate. And one of those was toast. And so we had champagne flutes filled with SodaBeers, apple beer. And it was very fun. People gave toasts, and it was really fun to celebrate with family and to cheers with everyone, raise your glass to a new beginning, and to do it with the people you love most, including all of the nieces and nephews that were there. We are all celebrating and able to drink that together in celebration, but also without the negative consequences of alcohol.
I agree. I'll never forget that toast, and that whole scene was very special. And I think too often the alcohol-free community is treated like an afterthought. People think, oh, Uncle so-and-so's coming, he doesn't drink. Let's give him lemonade. Your uncle doesn't want lemonade anymore. He's had it his whole entire life. He's not a kid. Can we consider people pay $10 a glass at their weddings or at their barbecues for a mixed drink or champagne to toast with, and their alcohol-free guests are given a 10-cent drink? Can people start considering the alcohol-free adults and teens in our society and worth spending a little bit of money on to send them a message that they are not second class at events.
So one of the bumps in the road is on entrepreneurship that we've discussed before. I feel like this is why knowing your why is so important. The competition you're going against is mighty.
Yes. I mentioned earlier that my why was in two parts, and it was I wanted to correct a personality flaw that I have.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think this is a little bit imposter syndrome, but different. Because I don't know if I feel imposter syndrome so much, but I have and have had since I was young performance anxiety.
Mm.
I avoid situations where I know I can't win or do well. In track, in my sophomore year, I did really well. I was 8th in the state, 5A school. It was a big deal. After that, I literally quit that event. I didn't think I could do better than that, which broke mom and dad's heart and my coach. And I had a hard time dealing with failure. Everyone's immature in high school. I can give myself a pass on that, but it shows up again in college. After I graduated in landscape architecture and was working in an architecture firm, I was supposed to sit my licensing exams. There were 7 at the time. They were so hard and so expensive. And engineering, construction, electrical. I was afraid that if I failed at passing those, my bosses would think I wasn't smart enough. Now, the story comes full circle because 14 years later, before I was asked to lead Apple Beer, I woke up and decided that I was going to correct that. I studied, took all those tests, and passed them all. The great thing about Apple Beer and SodaBeers is that there have been some serious bumps in the road, and I am really committed to working as hard as I can and giving it everything I have, no matter how things turn out, no matter how Coke tries to punish us and take us down and seeks to take away opportunities from us. Another why is to just correct that need to have a sure bet and be okay with, hey, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but I'm going to give it everything I have.
I hear you. And I feel like that vulnerability of putting yourself out there with, I don't know how this is going to go, is extremely hard.
It is.
And I think that is powerful why. I feel like you have two really powerful whys.
I started taking leadership in 2017 when Dad got sick. He was still there. He passed away in 2019. 2020, we're hit with the pandemic and closing all of our food service and our restaurants. That was hard. But 2022 and 2023 were the worst years I have ever had. And I worked for the company for 20 years, but inflation was punishing in a way that I never thought we would make it through. And that was a challenge. I am happy to say that things have completely turned around for us. We have made the decision that bottles are no longer viable because of inflation and that we have to choose a package we can deliver to our customers at affordable prices. The company has turned things around. There were 2 of the most difficult years I've had since serving a mission. I think it was just really hard. And I didn't quit, and I didn't even think about quitting. So I'm happy to say that I'm growing up in my late 40s.
You talk about barriers to entry, and I feel like soda has tremendous barriers to entry because the players like Coke and Pepsi are so big and have such a monopoly. Do you want to speak to that?
Oh, yeah. It's unlike I don't think anyone else has quite the same challenge. Beer companies have legislation because we co-pack with breweries often. And I've talked to them and said, does Budweiser put in contracts that make it so you can't sell your products in restaurants and venues? And they said, oh, no, we have legislation that prevents contracts of that nature. But soft drinks don't. Just another message that alcohol-free beverages are not worth people's time. I feel like that's baked into our society. Wherever you go, if you love craft beer, when you are in Michigan, you get a unique beverage from Michigan. But wherever you go in the United States, you are offered the same 6 sodas. If it's a taco truck, if it's a 5-star restaurant, they bring a menu to those who are drinking alcoholic beverages. The waitress
That's sometimes longer than the food menu.
Exactly.
Sorry.
But the alcohol free they simply say Coke or Pepsi. They don't even write it down. Wherever you are, it's the same drink you could have gotten at the hot dog stand on the street. People don't put the effort into this, but also because Coke and Pepsi put in contracts, a lot of times owners of restaurants don't know their rights and think they are not allowed to sell any other beverages. Most of those contracts read that they need to be 80 or 90% compliant. So there is room. And some of them only read the fountain machine has to be compliant. So they can't go into someone else's location and say, you can't sell anything here but Coke or Pepsi. They like to make that threat, but they really can't do that. It's a challenging business to be in because you have to educate people what their rights are. And then you have to find businesses that want local products and want a sense of place. What says to someone that this is a Utah restaurant? Maybe we can offer people visiting Utah or Idaho something that says, hey, this is a local beverage here. Why don't you try it?
You have a lot of bumps. And I would love to hear, how do you feel like knowing your why makes a difference?
Have you read Ryan Holiday? He's the Stoic philosopher. He's written so many books. One of them is The Obstacle is the Way. Do you remember that?
I feel like we have talked about it.
Dad used to always say to us, hey, if we didn't have problems, we wouldn't need you. The purpose of businesses is to deal and cope with difficulty. And if we act like difficulty and challenges are some great scheme against us and some abnormal thing to happen, the business can be very punishing. But if you expect challenges and difficulty as part of business, it's not that big of a deal. We just have to keep trying hard and work with the companies that love local products, like Harmon's Associated Food Stores, Macy's and Dick's and Fresh Markets, and all of them have really promoted local products. And we could focus on the frustrating aspects of going against the 2 big powerhouses. There's so many good companies that look out for us that I'm really grateful, and it's fun and exciting to work in this business.
So in the intro I read, it talked about that you were able to do a summit talk. I had the opportunity to listen to it. It was a tremendous speech that you gave. I'm totally putting you on the spot. Okay. But can you tell us a little bit about it?
I'm happy to talk about it. The timing was poignant because it was in 2023 when we were still scrambling for answers to deal with inflation. I was asked to talk about leadership, and I could have easily felt like a failure, but I chose not to. And my talk was about, I told the story of coaching soccer. I coached my daughter's soccer team and tried to teach these girls the power in keeping play going even when you're injured a little bit. You know, they're young girls, but I tried to feed that feeling inside of them of, yeah, I know someone hit you with the ball. I know someone kicked your ankles. It's hard playing soccer. It's a contact sport. No one's cheating. It's just the game. Keep playing. And we tried to reinforce that with recognition and treats and awards. I told the story about the time that we were playing the game and my daughter got hit in the face with the soccer ball. I knew she would be okay because I have also been hit in the face with the soccer ball. It didn't cause any damage, but in that moment where she was trying to decide how to react, I screamed as loud as I could, shoot it. And she did. She only could open one eye. She turned her body in. The other team reacting to her injury kind of stepped back and scored. And we won a game that we should have lost. And we won it because of difficulty. And a little bit about how that plays out in real world, that sometimes the stinging blows we receive actually open up opportunities. In part, Brian Holiday's The Obstacle is the Way has fed that notion. And I talked about being a small company ended up being beneficial because our suppliers gave us aluminum when they couldn't give other companies aluminum because they just needed too much. And this kept us on the shelves. Being small, being nimble was actually an opportunity. And the blows of the pandemic actually helped our company a little bit in different ways. Inflation has been the hardest thing we have dealt with as a company. Ultimately, it is helping us because it's making us really look at a business model that maybe was just okay. And that's the bottles. And there's a lot of emotion we have. We've been making these bottles for 26 years, but inflation has pushed us to the point where we had to make a decision. Ultimately, it's my responsibility to keep this company around so that we can continue to make our products. So we made the choice to phase out of the bottles and put all of our energy into cans. And I think that is an example of a stinging blow turning out to be an opportunity because we are already seeing that financial lift as we are divesting from bottles and putting it into cans. It's already making a difference for our company. Yeah, that was the gist of my talk.
It was a remarkable talk, and I feel like it's just incredible. The obstacle is the way is an important message, but not one that you hear often. I feel like that kind of goes against the grain because a lot of times you look at an obstacle as something that's going to hinder progress. What you're saying is, and I think I have heard it just slightly different in movies. There's a middle section where the character has something they need to do, but they're just stuck in the middle because things haven't gotten bad enough for them to do the thing they need to do. And I hear you saying that it was inflation for you that had you do the thing you didn't really want to do, but needed to do.
Yeah, yes. And it's funny, Cass, I talk to Dad a lot in my thoughts. I draw on his teachings constantly. I tutored under him for 20 years. I always had a sense that I needed to do something different. And it took me until I made this decision for that sense to go away. On some level, I knew what I had to do, but it took this push. It took the push of inflation to a level that I was calling China, trying to get bottles. I literally called every brewery in Utah, trying to figure out how to make our bottles more affordable. And I'm glad I did the work. I'm glad I did my homework and my due diligence on it, but I don't feel troubled anymore. I really feel at peace with where we're going and very optimistic and excited about the next few stages in our company's future. I think it's going to be very fun. We updated our cans to a nod to our retro look. And that's going to be rolling out as we introduce all the bottle flavors into cans. Those are going to be on the shelves. Our partners in Associated Food Stores and Harmon's have been supportive and helpful. We just have such a good relationship with them. I'm really excited. I feel like, yeah, the obstacle wasn't something blocking my path. The obstacle was the path. And I'm glad I finally took it.
I don't know why it feels like that Star Wars-esque. I could hear Yoda saying the obstacle is the way. How do you feel like you receive inspiration for your business? Inspiration or direction?
Yeah. I'm going to say the most boring thing that could possibly be said, but through the numbers. And that's as contrary to my personality as of anything I could say. I'm so visual and more conceptual, philosophical, emotional. But if a business does not have its margins in place, it does not matter what you are selling, your company will not make it. And that is what I felt was haunting me with Dad during those 2 years when we couldn't figure out how to respond to the inflation. I poured over the numbers, and numbers don't lie. That is how I've received inspiration, is letting the numbers tell me what I need to hear, not telling them what I want them to be.
Interesting. I feel like one of the takeaways from me in that is I feel like with entrepreneurship, a lot of it, especially with marketing, you don't really know what's going to stick or what's going to land. And so I've heard the analogy is you're just throwing spaghetti at the wall. And I feel like for me, for a while, I just kept throwing and throwing, but not really taking the time to analyze what's going to land. What I hear you saying is look at the numbers, because you can't really like manipulate numbers. Like just look at those and analyze those and let that be your guide. See what is going to land. I feel like there's different numbers you could be looking at.
Dad used to always say, it takes no talent to give your product away. The question is, will people pay what it costs to make it, and with decent margins in place? And if you can't honestly answer yes to that, then we got to face the truth on it.
I like what you're saying, because I hear you saying you're thinking long term. Because sure, like the next 5 minutes, I can give away as many things as I want, break all the records, but long term, that's not going to do anything for your company.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have a plan that can keep your company growing? And to do that, if you're going to have money to invest in marketing and growth, you have to have sustainable margins in place.
For people that are still looking for their why, what would you say?
I'm sorry, I don't feel like I could ever give someone their why. That is such a deeply personal thing. I would say whys come in all different shapes and sizes, but I don't think you have to like your job every single day. I don't think anyone does that. But I think it has to make you feel like you have purpose. Like ultimately, you are doing something that benefits society and you. And there are so many different ways we can help society. I'm a soda company. Some people think we're the bad guys, but I sincerely feel like I'm making a difference in our society. You don't have to be selling water to people in a desert to have value, but you need to find purpose and meaning in what you do. I think that makes a difference. I don't think jobs need to be fun or pleasant all the time, but they do really need to be meaningful, and no one can make something meaningful for you. It has to come from inside based on your values. What are your values? And do you find meaning in it?
I know your soapboxes, and I want you to get on one.
Okay, I felt like I already had, but what other soapbox do I?
So the one about us being called non-drinkers.
Oh, yeah, even I feel like society has put down alcohol-free people for so long that we have become numb to it. And instead of saying this group is alcohol-free, they say they don't drink. And I'm like, we should probably stop drinking because you give us crap wherever we go. That is how it feels. We are treated like we don't drink. And we do actually drink. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would.
And it does bother me that it's such a big part of our society. Even here in Utah, where there's like huge population that is alcohol free, still wherever we go, we are offered Coke or Pepsi. And at 7 p.m., when you're like, oh, if I have this Coke, which I mean, I like Coke, I like Pepsi. If I drink this, I'll be up till 4 a.m. So thanks for that. Or lemonade, which I hate. I hate lemonade. I
Same.
have that from the kids in the neighborhood enough. That is solidly a kid's drink. Please stop with the lemonade, people. Let's start treating adults and teenagers with a little more respect and dignity.
That's funny. And that's actually really true. You're going through the neighborhood and there's a kid on the side of the road that's selling lemonade. That's the same thing that your high-end restaurants are offering.
Yes,
It's a
yes,
really good point.
this is a problem. And I wish more people could see that. I will tell you that movement of alcohol-free and sober curious is growing. And alcohol sales in America dipped by 10% in 2023, which is the most it's dipped in an entire generation. This awareness is growing, and hopefully businesses can find a way to get around these contracts that they feel controlled by, because there are ways around them, especially if either of those big soda contracts don't have a similar product, which they don't on our products, then they can bring it in. So that does help them get around those contracts.
So, Ash, one of the things I heard you saying is the obstacle is the way. That's one I want to listen to. I know we've talked about it before, and I should have followed up. I do want to hear another book recommendation for you. What have you got?
I read a lot. Like I get 2 credits a month
What?
in Audible, but it's never enough. Also, partly because my children steal them as soon as they land. It's the battle. One of the books that made the most impact on my life is, and you won't be surprised because I think I talked to you about it a lot, is Byron Katie, Loving What Is. And I feel like her message is stop blaming other people for your problems, basically. She makes people go through the process of saying whatever grievance they have about someone else, to say it about themselves and find a way to actually mean that. She gave an example of someone who's mad at their spouse for always smoking. She made that woman admit that she smoked not nicotine and cigarettes, but she had her things that she goes to for a hit when she is stressed. It's just a way to turn judgments and accusations on their head. I think we are a little bit of a grievance-based society. I noticed it when I was watching the American Ninja Warrior. Every person they introduced, they started the introduction by telling them the worst thing that had ever happened to them, their biggest grievance, pain, tragedy. And I was like, I think it's good to talk about those things, but that can't be the way we see ourselves. And love this book because it really made me look at how much I had gone around blaming people for my feelings or for my situations. And I really went through the process of saying those things about myself and fully acknowledging that I was just as bad or worse than those people I was accusing. That book has been revolutionary for my life. I feel like a new person because of that mental practice that I go through many times a year, reminding myself that it's not really a skill to walk around blaming people.
One of my takeaways, we have talked about this book before, and you had told me how much it had changed your life. I had read it, and it was interesting because my takeaway was slightly different. She talked about that we get stuck in the way things are supposed to be. Mm-hmm. As I was reading, I would be like, I would never do that. It was not very long after that, it was close to the pandemic, and my husband was working at home full time. And I was upset about that wasn't the way that things were supposed to be. And it was really funny because I heard this thing that I had read that I swore I was never like that. And very clearly I was talking about how in my life, how things weren't the way that they were supposed to be. And that idea of loving and accepting where things are right now in your life. And I think with our children, it is easy to get into an idea of where our kids are supposed to be instead of just loving them where they are, wherever they are in this minute, loving them And that's not to say that they can't grow and develop into something else, but holding that space for that expansion, but also just that acceptance and love of where we are right now and where others in our lives are right now.
Yeah, you're right. There's that Faith Matters podcast about our messy families. He talks about the brochure saying this is how your family's going to be. This is how life is going to play out for you, and how your kids are going to be, and how your spouse is going to be, and how your career is going to be. I think that message is so harmful because nobody gets that brochure life. And yet we see it somehow all around us. And it makes us feel wronged when we are simply just mortal. Mortality is rough and unpredictable.
The talk that Ash is referencing right now is so good. It is the honest truth about our messy families. It's a conversation with Joseph Grinney, and it is on Faith Matters. It is excellent. And I totally reiterate what you're saying. I think we do have the pamphlet family, LDS family in our lives that we're not, nobody is that. Having that knowledge is helpful.
And I wonder, how did we all get the idea that's what we were promised? That if we lived a certain life, we were all going to be given it. No one's ever said that. But so many people feel like that is what they were promised. And no, we are not promised that. We are promised a dynamic relationship where our Father in heaven hears us and guides us. That's what we're promised. And we don't get to have the white picket fence Instagram life. I think that is so harmful and causes more people to lose faith than we know.
I thought it was really interesting too. They talked about in this talk, let's figure out what those quote unquote brochure families look like. It was from like the 1800s or something. And it was like an old school photo with one dude and four wives around him. And that was the brochure family for that time period. And then he pulled up another time period and it was the Osmonds. Then he pulled it up for another time period and it was the Bromneys. And I just think within each of those families, there's things that we don't know that are happening. Each person has their own trials and tribulations.
We can guess obstacles. Some of the trials that the polygamists went through. We can't guess the trials that others around us in our same generation go through. We don't know, do we?
No. So Asha, in the beginning about what you were most proud of, and you said your relationships, your family, and that the way that you do that is you try and do your best, and then you apologize and forgive and move on. And I feel like what a better kind of like mentality of relationships and friendships than the pamphlet idea. And thank you for being here today. Thank you for your words of wisdom. And I love talking to us. You're one of my favorite people. I appreciate you being on here, Ash.
Well, Cass, thank you for your thoughtful questions and the love and sincerity. You put your whole heart into this podcast, and all these conversations are meaningful, and people, knowledge is really the key to get through hardships. And so you don't really know what wisdom does for people, but I think it's helpful. Thank you for putting it out there for everybody to hear and grow from.
So if you liked what you heard today, you can follow, comment. We'll be here next week. Sorry, Ash won't be here next week, which is just sad. I'll be here next week with another guest. We'll see you next week.
Bye.